Hello everyone, and welcome back to Coffee with Courtney. We've been talking about community and what it looks like to have it, what it really takes to choose it in a meaningful way, not just running into each other or having it by accident, but being intentional about the community that we have. And I've so loved beginning this journey with all of you. Last week we talked about extroverts and introverts and responders and initiators and how we can use our skills to work together to build a community that's worth having. And that's where I want to pivot today. Is we know, I think, that we want community, that we need it, that we want to be intentional about having it, but what kind of community are we investing in? What kind of community are we trying to build? And when I think about community, and this might be a me thing, but I think of a safe place. That has been just a really big watchword for me for the last couple of years, that I want my home, my presence, to be a safe place for other people. So why call it that? I actually wrote that phrase in a paper recently to a professor, and they weren't big fans of that, because what they heard was safety in terms of not accepting challenges, not being willing to do the hard things. So why not call it a challenging place or a peaceful place or a happy place? Here's my answer to that one. Where security and safety is truly achieved, there is room for all those other things. And when it is really being achieved, those other things will be a part of that safe place, because any safe place that we build should be to the glory of the Lord, right? As believers, we want to be focused on the presence and praise of our Father, and we want that to be what is evident in these safe places that we're building. So because our safe place has a purpose, which is to glorify the Lord, love Him well, and love others well, it morphs that safe place into a place where all of those other things are hopefully achieved. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But for right now, I want us to stay focused on that idea of what needs to happen in order to achieve that safety. I think about child psychology books and parenting books and the things that encourage us to set limits for the children in our lives, education books, the things that encourage us to set limits for the children in our classrooms, so on and so forth. And one of the things that child psychologists consistently say to us, right, is that without some sense of limits, children can't grow. You find that kids will tuck themselves in cabinets, right? They'll choose these places that feel close because it feels safe and secure. And in those places that feel small, they can often create this whole other world. When I was younger, I would play teacher with a friend of mine, and she and I had an entire setup in the understairs closet of her parents' house, and we had our bookshelf and all of our teacher books and all of our lesson plans. I understand I was a very serious geek as a child, but the point is, in that tiny space, we built a whole world. And it was ours, and it was set aside for us to do specifically that. And so there was so much freedom inside that confine. And the same thing happens relationally when we set limits, not on what we can achieve, but on how we behave towards one another. Scripture gives us those limits for just that reason, to create that safe place where, because we are good to one another, we have this immense capacity for freedom and expression and the capacity to glorify Him in what we do. So, when I think of the core values of a safe place, the things that immediately come to mind for me are trust and love and vulnerability. The Lord Himself calls Himself our safe place. He calls us to come to Him as our safe place. And this was really revolutionary a little bit in my thinking, that it doesn't offend the Lord that we want to hide sometimes. He just wants us to hide in Him. Like the child that picks that cabinet or that closet to create this whole world. He wants us to run to Him and hide in Him. He calls Himself our refuge, our strong tower. The scripture says He hides us beneath His wings, that He puts us in the cleft of the rock and covers us, that He hides us in His tent and His tabernacle. And His presence is described as a secret place that we can hide in. This idea that the world is hard, that we're going to face difficult things, that we're going to need a place to hide, that doesn't offend the Lord. I don't believe, in the same way that it offends us. Like, we want to show that we're so strong that we don't need a place to hide. And I feel like Scripture tells us the exact opposite. It says, the world is too hard often for you. You weren't made to do it on your own. Come hide in me, where I can strengthen you, where I can help you, where I can be that strong tower that arms you and defends you and prepares you to face these things that you're dealing with. So as we find that in Him, we also become that for ourselves and for others. That is a very important thing for me that I've been thinking a lot about in the course of probably the last year or two, is what it looks like to be first and foremost a safe place for myself. Even before I think about how to be a safe place for other people. That second one was always easy for me and a passion for me, but I would often skip the first one. I wouldn't be a safe place for me. I remember going upstairs at one point, and one of my children ran out and they just said something so awful about themselves. I think Matthew called himself stupid or something like that. And oh, my mama bear, heartbroken, I just wanted to roar truth into my child's life. You're mine. You can't be those things because you're mine. And it's not okay for you to call yourself those things because you're mine. And in that moment, the Lord said, don't you think I feel the same way towards you? It's not okay for us to call ourselves names, to think poorly of ourselves. Certainly the Lord wants us to respond to His conviction. But this guilt and shame that we so often get trapped in and just lost in this negative talk about who we are, that does not glorify the Lord. Just as my mama bear roared when my son spoke of himself poorly, the Lord's papa bear roars when we speak poorly of ourselves. So we need to become a safe place for ourselves and allow His safety, His confidence, His truth of who we are to spill over not only into our own lives, but into the lives of others. So when we think of these safe places, sometimes I think we see things best by seeing their opposite. And so I do think that there are three opposites of a safe place that we can do by accident, and that when we do them, we end up destroying the very thing we're trying to achieve. Now, I'm going to call these three opposites a fake place, a cruel place, and a permissive space. When we have those things in existence in any of our relationships, that core need for trust, love, and vulnerability is going to be eroded. So we are going to talk more about that next week. What happens when being fake, being cruel, or being permissive takes over the spaces that we're trying to build, and what we can do about it. Can't wait to see you then.